right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into the Sports Card Therapist, where I give you a behind the scenes look at my hobby hustle and sprinkle in some self care and wellness on top of that. I'm Rob Gerard, your Sports Card Therapist. And whether if you're listening to me on iTunes, Spotify, or watching on YouTube, welcome to the podcast. This has been a great week so far of the roundtable discussions that I've been doing. As you know, I'm going to be doing these for the entire month of December, bringing together some of the hobby's biggest and best passionate collectors, content creators, personalities, and everything in between for really, really cool, thought provoking round table discussions. And I hope you've been enjoying them so far. And today there is no shortage of fun. We are going to be talking about non-sports cards, guys. So I brought together two of the biggest, most passionate non-sports cards collectors that I know in the hobby. I brought Jeff Ing from Jeff's Cards on Instagram, and I brought Dan Wynn, aka the Great Curator. Jeff and Dan, how you guys doing today?
Good, thank you.
Doing well. It's nice to be here.
Oh man, I am super excited to have you guys on because because when I think about non-sports cards, like the first thing that goes to my mind is probably Pokemon, right? Like I think Pokemon, it's got a big part of the hobby, but when I think about the kind of stuff that you and I have discussed, me with discussing with you guys, and the kind of things that I've seen you guys have at shows set up, I have seen some of the coolest, most interesting products I've ever seen, and it feels like non-sports cards are really becoming more and more significant and growing in the hobby. Jeff, let's start with you, man. Like, where do you feel like what do you feel like this segment of the hobby is going? Does it feel like it's growing? Does it feel like it's stopped? Is it shrinking? What's the reaction people have when they come up to your table?
Yeah, well, I feel like it's definitely moving in a favorable direction. I mean, so much so that I don't even want to like reference, some of the cards that we have as non-sports, right? Because we're then sort of comparing that to sports, right? I think we should maybe spin it more positively and just call it like sort of pop culture cards, right? Or wrestling cards, or Pokemon cards, or whatever they are, as opposed to like something in contrast to sports, right? So I'm making a pitch to no longer refer to them as non-sports cards, right? So yeah, I definitely think it's moving in a really positive direction. I think there's a huge demographic that loves the pop culture cards. And I think it's a demographic that's very, very broad. I think, as we all know, there is a card for essentially every like sort of pop culture franchise or phenomenon that's out there, right? Whether it's Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift to Cabbage Patch Dolls, right? And what are those cards? Garbage Pail Kids, to Star Wars, to Marvel, to DC, right? There's something out there for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, I cannot wait to get your take on this because it really, I mean, your personality in the hobby, bigger than life. You are you're just someone that it seems like there's a storm behind you everywhere you go. And I have no idea why, because the only thing that I get from you is pump what you like. So when you say pump what you like, what are the first types of cards that come to mind?
Well, just to address that real quick here, I think I've become like the heel of the hobby, in terms of the cards that I promote. But I'm just having a lot of fun with it, and the the hashtag that I kind of created and push, pump what you like, is really just based around showing off cards that you love. And I don't know when it became taboo in the hobby to show off cards that you collect or cards that you like. Um, but at some point it did, where people would see a card and they would not see it for whatever collectible value it had, whatever nostalgic value or whatever. They would only see it for like a monetary value. So that's why when I started showing off the pop culture cards, people were not very accepting of it because they just thought they were worthless and junk because they're only seeing it for monetary value. So I tried to really push it in terms of trying to normalize the fact that you could show off things that maybe not necessarily are comparable in value to all the sports cards that people will show off and things like that. But you could actually show off things that you collect. And it just happened to be like in the last year or so that these pop culture cards started to take off. Like Jeff was saying, there's really like a fandom for everybody. And I think a lot of people connected with the fact that they were finally, for the first time, discovering that their favorite TV show or movie or toy line or whatever had cards in it, and then they kind of gravitated towards that. So that's kind of been like the niche that I've been leaning in the last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, well listen, if you guys are watching on YouTube, I think you'll see that I actually just changed the bottom ticker that scrolls because for the first 5 minutes it said non-sports cards. I just changed it to pop culture cards. So I hope that you
Fabulous.
guys are okay with that. I mean, I do like
Love
the
it.
idea
Mm-hmm.
of pop culture cards, and I think one thing that might rub people the wrong way. First of all, I think it's human nature to really be weary and scared of change, right? So anytime there's something that comes along that we just don't quite understand, a lot of times we'll start putting up these walls and defenses toward
Sure.
that. And I think I saw that a lot with the NFTs, right? About a year or two ago, NFTs were getting really pumped, and I wasn't a fan of NFTs. I wasn't tearing them down and going on
Mm-hmm.
tangents about why they were going to fail or anything like that. But I think some people looked at NFTs like, well, people are pumping NFTs, and what they're doing is they're targeting sports card collectors. And I think in hindsight, I did see some of that. I saw that, the NFT space was really trying to gravitate toward collectors because we collect things and we like to collect.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure. Do you guys think that maybe the reason why pop culture cards are almost like the redheaded stepchild of sports cards is because they almost feel like money will be taken out of the hobby, even though it's all part of the same hobby?
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think people are a little bit guarded or defensive for that point of view. But I think that the case that I always try to make is that um, you know we don't just collect sports cards. We are card collectors, and what we do is we recognize cards as a legitimate form of collectible. And the only difference between a Marvel card, Star Wars card, or a basketball card, football card, whatever, is just the subject matter of the card. So that's something that I try to push or have that conversation with people where we need to look at cards as what they are, which is a form of collectible, and
Mm-hmm.
then the IP of the card is just whatever you like.
Right.
It doesn't have to be separate. One of the reasons why I think that I get like a lot of flack sometimes is I feel like I'm a card collector, a pop culture card collector in a sports card world. I
Mm-hmm.
go to all
Yeah.
the sports card shows instead of the non-sports card shows or the pop culture shows or comic cons or anything like that. I actually go to the sports card shows and
Mm-hmm.
set up. So I'm kind of like an oddball in that regard, and people are just not used to it. But I will say over the course of the year, I mean, I see Jeff at a lot of shows. Maybe Jeff, you can back me up on this. I have seen the spreading of people who are displaying, pop culture cards with their sports cards. So I'm thinking that people are starting to accept it for what it
Mm-hmm.
is. But I still think that still people, when they think of sports cards or when they think of cards, it's only sports cards. The
Right.
same way that when people like 30 years ago, when they think of cards, they thought baseball cards. We used to
Right.
just call it baseball cards. And then it evolved into sports cards.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the next evolution will be just cards, just
Mm-hmm.
collectible cards.
Right. Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think, and yes, Dan. First of all, I do see you at all the shows, both the sport and the sports card shows, and I agree that there has been a growing segment of folks who have historically done sports cards that are now leaning into pop culture cards. But I definitely agree to refer back to your question earlier, Rob, about the guardedness. I think folks do have a level of skepticism about anything new that's being sort of marketed to them or sold to them, whether it's NFTs or anything else that seems novel. I think we do need to remember that there was a time when baseball cards and basketball cards, but that those were not the norm as well, right? I mean, I think we've all heard the story about the 1952 Topps cases being dumped into the ocean, right? I mean, they weren't popular, right? They were, the anomaly, right? And folks who collected them or purchased them were seen as oddballs, right? And similar ways to maybe how some folks might see folks who collect pop culture cards now.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I found myself probably about a year ago like purchasing a lot of, and these are low end, right? When it comes to this kind of stuff, I mean, I think I have a couple what would be considered high end cards. And I know you guys brought cards to show off. I brought cards to show as well. And I can't wait to do those and really get into the, the meat and the potatoes of it. But it feels like now we're just really just trying to build that foundation of the conversation. But I could remember buying a bunch of the Pop Century cards, right? Pop Century, it felt like it was a relatively new product. I hadn't seen a lot of them, and something about it just really jumped out to me. And I think for the same reason with sports cards, for me, I'm connected to sports cards that are nostalgic for me, that bring some sort of nostalgia, something that, and if it's not nostalgia, if it's something that's modern, something that I feel some sort of connection with. Right. So I can remember, Jeff, you and I were set up. Been set up right next to each other a couple times at shows.
Quite a few times, yes.
Yeah, so I can remember being set up at Autograph Fest, which is the Rick Probstein show.
Right. In New Jersey.
In New Jersey, yep. And I can remember that's where you picked up the James Gandolfini.
Yes.
auto. Do you have that with you?
I do have that with me, and I'll show it to you all, right now.
Oh,
yeah. So
can you hold it to the camera a little bit closer?
Is it in focus?
Oh no, yeah. Okay. Okay, there it is. There it is. Yep. So the James Gandolfini, yes. And what brand is that?
It's from Donruss, from 2004 Donruss Elite. It was part of the Fans of the Game insert set. If you all remember, there were a lot of different sort of celebrity and pop culture figures in that set.
And now that card, what's that card numbered out of?
It's actually not numbered.
So it's like a short print, because
I hope so.
Let me tell you something.
I wouldn't care less if it was or not, personally.
I feel like I've seen pictures of that card before. I might have seen it on someone's Instagram page.
Yeah.
I saw yours when you got it.
Right.
But other than that, I looked on eBay. I've done my research. I haven't been able to find that card anywhere. So I have a lower end version of that with the Pop Century. I have the James Gandolfini. It's the leather. It's a leather swatch. So it's an authentic wardrobe. A big, probably leather jacket worn by him. So, it's a pretty big patch. So that's cool. So, big Sopranos fan. I mean, I think about the amount, and you and I, just at the show that that I saw you, we were right next to each other a couple weeks ago. And that's when I really got my gears turning, when we were sitting there talking, and you and I, we spent probably about 10 minutes talking about The Sopranos.
Yes.
Right.
We both are huge fans. Yes.
Huge, like super fans.
Yes,
I think about
fans,
hundreds and hundreds of hours of my life that I spent consuming Sopranos.
Yes.
So I have such a connection to that show, just because of the amount of time I spent and my love for it.
Yes.
So it only makes sense that I would collect something like this.
Of course. Yeah. And that's the same reason I picked up that card. I knew the card existed, and I had been on the lookout for that card literally for years, because of that sort of emotional connection to that show and what that show represented to me. So I was so thrilled to acquire it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dan, what do you have for us? Do you have? Let's kick this off. What card would you like to show us first?
Okay. I'm going to show you a couple cards, but first I just want to touch on that point that you just made about your strong connection to watching Sopranos. I think everybody can relate to that. Everybody has like a TV show that they became obsessed with, that they watched on a weekly basis, or that they binge watched for, seasons at a time, or somebody has like a favorite movie or a favorite toy that they played with as a kid. And that's why pop culture cards are so cool. And to me, they're going to be very significant because, everybody has some type of connection to some type of, IP out there. And what's going to happen is, just like that story that you told where you didn't even realize that they had Soprano cards, and when you did, you wanted to get one. I think that's what people are going to start to find out, that people who are card collectors, they realize, like I said before, they realize that cards are a legitimate form of collectible. And then once they understand that they make cards of their favorite movie, TV show, toy, or whatever, that's when you're going to get that crossover crowd over. And not to say that cards are ever going to be like the same price as sports cards, but I think that what helps is that now people are starting to frame the cards in a way that sports card collectors understand, by getting them graded. The companies that make these cards are making like, the same type of like the PMG brand for Marvel. They're using legacy brands and crossing them over so that we understand it more. They're doing like numbered cards and things like that. And as these pop culture cards start to get packaged into a way that we understand it as collectors, I think people will be more accepting of that stuff. So with that, I've got a couple cool things to show you guys here. Am I going to get a chance to come back, or you want me to show you everything I have?
No.
He doesn't want to lose the opportunity, right?
No, we're going to come back. We'll definitely keep circling the wagons here.
Okay, so first off, I'm going to show you something different, okay? Because I know we're going to talk about wrestling. I know we're going to talk about Star Wars, Marvel, stuff like that. So I'm going to show you something different that not many people consider, okay? And when I show you these things, I'm sure that it's going to elicit some type of response from you guys. And I'm hoping that you guys, once you see these things, you'll be like, that makes perfect sense. Why didn't I think of that? Or why didn't I start collecting this? Okay. So one of the things that I used to be a sports card collector. I'm still a sports card collector, but I've moved out of that as my main focus. And I've gone into pop culture over the last year. And one of my strategies is I look for things, like I was talking about, that I have some type of emotional connection to, things that I collected as a kid, TV shows, movies that I watch, anything that makes me feel excited. When I see it, I kind of go towards that. And I especially look for IPs, intellectual properties, that I think, what in terms of from an investor's point of view, I look for things that have a strong fan base, where I feel like, okay, if this card ever gets exposed to this type of fan base, that will create a huge demand for it, and that will, increase the price. So one of the areas that I've been really leaning into lately that I feel like nobody ever talks about is Disney cards. And in particular, I've got two. I'll show you guys some vintage, and I'll show you some modern. I'll show you the modern first because it's just fun. Okay. So one of the biggest, if anybody ever talks about Disney, they're probably going to start talking about Pixar movies, right? I think anybody that grew up in the last 30 years probably watched at least one Pixar movie, either Toy Story, Incredibles, Wall-E, things like that. So they recently came out. There's a company called Weiss Schwarz. Okay. They recently came out with a Pixar card line, and they've never made Pixar cards before. Okay. And I've been buying these boxes up, and I'll show you some of these cards here. Can you see that? Is that in focus?
That's Buzz Lightyear, right?
Buzz Lightyear,
yeah.
This is a Buzz Lightyear gold stamp. There's a Luxo lamp, Incredibles. What is this card?
And those are TCG cards, right? Because Weiss Schwarz makes TCG.
Yes,
right?
yes. So they have the license. Well, I don't even know if it's an exclusive license, but they're the only company that I know that is making Pixar cards right now. Right. And I discovered this at the last Dallas show. Some guy right next to me, is a crazy story. I never knew that they came out with these. These probably came out like 2 months ago. And I'm sitting next to this guy at the Dallas card show. I'm set up next to him, and he's got a bunch of like anime stuff, Pokemon, Weiss Schwarz, things like that. And he had like 10 boxes of Pixar, because they just came out, and he had them on his table. And I didn't think too much about it because I didn't know anything about it, but I kept seeing people go by his table and look at this box and ask him what it was. And they were like, "Oh, Pixar cards? Are you serious?" And they kept buying the boxes from him. And after about like 2 hours, he nearly sold out of all his boxes, and he had like one more case left. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on this. So I just bought one of his boxes, and I opened it, and I started looking through all the cards here. and it's like every card was just like so nostalgic to me that I loved it so much that I just I bought him out. I bought out all his boxes. He had like 7 boxes left. And then
Wow.
I started ripping the packs just for myself for fun on my table. And literally I had a crowd of people form around me saying, "What is that?" And they were like looking at all these cards and they wanted to buy the cards from me. They wanted to buy the individual packs from me.
Mhm.
They were trying to buy the boxes from me, the sealed boxes. And I was like, wow, this might be something here. And it just kind of falls into my philosophy of like anything that's nostalgic, any type of strong IP that has a good fan base, once they figure out that they make cards of these, and if those people are card collectors,
Mhm.
then they're going to want that product.
Sure.
So I've been having a lot of fun with the Pixar cards. Happy to show that off. And anybody that I ever show these things off to, they love it. Here's another Toy Story one right
Mhm.
there. So these are the modern ones. And then if I'm gonna go vintage, because I know you're a big vintage collector, I go back even further and I go to the original Disney cards. Okay. And I'll show you this Mickey Mouse card. I don't even know what the story of this one is. It's like a blank back. I think it's from the 40s, okay, 50s. I don't even know what this is, but I just love what is a more iconic character than Mickey Mouse, right? So when you find out that there's
Yeah.
cards like this, you want to collect it. You don't even know what it is, but you want to collect it. And what I was saying earlier about like how cards like this, you look at this, who knows how much this is worth? $10, $20, I don't know, right? As is like this. But if you package a card like this in a way that we as collectors, as sports card investors understand, if you put it in a PSA holder, right, and you assign a grade to it and it has information about what it is, now we as collectors and investors, we understand what this is. Now
There
this
it is.
becomes a legitimate collectible. It was before, it was probably like a $5 card, but if we we grade it, suddenly the value increases. And this card right here, this is a very underrated card here. This is the 1931 Walt Disney. What is it called? Walt Disney Cinema Stars. This is Walt Disney's first card. I call it his rookie card.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what's so significant about this, it's a tobacco card, but it has not only Walt Disney, but Mickey Mouse on it. The first card of both of these iconic Disney legends. And it's just things like this that excite me, looking for undervalued, well, I would consider them undervalued, but basically just underappreciated cards that the majority of people don't even know exist, and chasing these things down and building collection around this and seeing if it works. And then the last thing I'll show you, this is not card related, but in the same vein of things being packaged in a way that we understand. This is a Walt Disney cut signature. Just another cool collectible
That's super cool.
that
Yes.
any Walt Disney fan would want, right? But most people wouldn't understand like this piece of paper. They wouldn't see this necessarily as a collectible until it's slabbed up
Right.
and categorized in a way that we can understand. So just stuff like that is what I love to kind of chase down, these like niche pop culture areas. And it excites me because I live in California. I live like 10 minutes from Disneyland. And this is just right up my alley.
Yeah, I remember I was in a group transcendent break one time. I think it was like a Leighton break. And I think the Walt Disney oversized cut auto was pulled, right? And people were so excited about it, right? Just because, right, Disney is such a recognizable brand, right? And how many cut autos, are out there. And then once it gets, as you were saying, Dan, like cataloged and like legitimized, by PSA or Topps, right? Then it has even more sort of value to folks.
Yeah. Then we want it, right?
Then we want
it was
it,
just
exactly.
it was just like a note card was like whatever, right? But
Right.
if it's framed in a way where we as collectors understand, how it is, then suddenly like it becomes very desirable.
Exactly.
And it's first of all, Dan, that collection right there, unbelievable with Disney. And I love what you're saying. And I think, I think taken out of context, it can, like, I think someone could like listen to what you're saying and be like, oh, well, he's only going after stuff that he thinks he's prospecting on different, niches of the market and stuff. But it's like, yeah, of course you are, because we spend a lot of money on these collectibles, so these are an investment, and I think
Mhm.
once you cross that threshold of how much money you're spending on something, it's irresponsible to not look at the money we're spending as an
Mhm.
investment.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we're really prospecting. It's no different than looking at stocks and saying, you know what? I think I would. I think I see this stock getting big over
Mhm.
time. I think I'm going to do it. But I mean, Disney, absolutely.
Mhm.
And it's crazy that you had just showed that cut auto as the last thing, because about 15 minutes ago, I was going to mention how even though it's not technically a trading card, I see so many former president autograph cuts that are slabbed in PSA slabs going on auction,
Mhm.
and I've almost pulled the trigger so many times on them, but I don't know if I really feel that connection to like a former US president, even if I
Mhm.
was alive during the presidency. For me, I'm not a big political guy, so I don't know if I feel that. It would be more of an investment type thing, but I totally agree with what you're saying.
Right.
If you throw something in a PSA slab and all of a sudden it starts to blur that line with
Mhm.
sports card collectors.
Mhm. Yeah, the only caveat, Rob, I would add to what you're sharing about the prospecting is that I think for me and maybe for you, Dan, that even if your cards do not increase in value, right, because you still have a passion and a love and a sort of nostalgic emotional connection to it, that you'd be fine, right, because you like what you're buying. I mean, of course, we
Yeah.
want all of our items to increase in value, but if it didn't, I suspect that you would be okay with it, right?
Believe me, guys, I learned the hard way over the last 2 years
Mhm.
that you got to really love these things that you're spending your hard-earned money on. You've got to know it, love it, and be okay collecting it, and rather than chasing, just chasing profit, or like you said, prospecting things like
Mhm.
that. Because if you don't love something that you buy, it's very hard to hold it, especially when the market goes up and down the way that it has. So that is definitely one of the focal points of my strategy, is just buying things that have that connection, that I had that connection, that nostalgic
Right.
feeling. Like for me, the way that I kind of describe it is like, if I love something, I want to own, like the type of person that I am as a collector. If I love something, I want to own a little physical representation of it.
Mhm.
Like, I love Disney. So I need to have a little physical representation of Mickey Mouse that I can hold
Right.
in my hands. Um, just this little side note. I want to tell a story because you guys said about, you showed that James Gandolfini auto. Um, a show that I loved growing up as a kid was um, or a character, or not a character, but a celebrity that I loved, was Anthony Bourdain. I watched
Mhm.
all his shows, right?
Right.
No Reservations, things like that. And when he passed away, I felt very sad. And I went out and I found out that he had a like a Topps Allen and Ginter auto.
Mhm.
So I
Yes.
went out and grabbed and I purchased it, or I hunted it down, because I wanted that physical representation of something that I had a connection to. And that's really where I center my whole strategy of
Mhm.
collecting things. Is if it doesn't like excite me some way, or have a connection, then something I'm not interested in. I don't
Right.
I don't just buy cards because I think that I'm going to be able to flip it in the future. I
Mhm.
buy things that I love, and my whole strategy is, if I love it, all I got to do is find somebody else who loves it just as much as me, or a little bit more, and
Right.
then I can move it to them.
Yeah, and I'm the same way, Dan. I tend to buy things and collect things that I love, that I'm passionate about, and I get that there are folks out there who have a different approach, right? They're there strictly to monetize their experience and to make a profit, and that's fine too. And I think Rob and I were talking a few weeks ago about how we need all these different folks, right, in the industry, in the hobby, right? We need folks like us who can buy and just buy because we love what we're buying, but we also need the folks who trying to flip.
You know, and if I could just add to that point too, and I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this. I think that with the boom, the pandemic boom, a profit became like the thing that everybody was chasing, because it was
Mhm.
so easy. It was very attainable to jump into the hobby, buy cards that you had no connection to, and flip them and make money.
Mhm.
And for a long time, and even now, that was the way that we defined success in the hobby. How much money could you make on a card? How quickly could you
Mhm.
flip it? Things like that. But I think that we have to get back to our roots. Now that it is much harder because of the way the market is right now, I think that we have to get back to our roots of collecting. And
Mhm.
we have to define success in the hobby as building collection that you can proudly show off, that people would covet, things like that, irregardless of value. And if we kind of normalize that over profit, I think that will help a lot of people maybe enjoy the hobby more and not get themselves in trouble.
Yeah, and very well said, guys. Oh my God, I feel like I could just sit back and listen to you two talk for the next hour. I mean, this is a great conversation so far. And Dan, man, I got to be honest. I think one of the greatest things I've heard from doing this podcast, which is now I think episode 124.
Wow,
You
congratulations
just
on that.
you just nailed, man. And you said, when there's something I love that I have a connection to and that I'm passionate with, I want to own a small representation of that. And I mean, it's just so simply put, but I've never heard it put so simply like that. And that's absolutely what it is. That's why I felt so good buying that, James Gandolfini leather worn jacket swatch.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think about, I mean, I would go to bed thinking about Sopranos. I'd wake up thinking about Sopranos. I was so immersed in this story, you know what I mean? And that's just what it did to me. And so yeah, I love how you worded that. It's phenomenal. So all right, so Dan, how you and I actually met, right? How we actually came to was through non-sports cards. I don't know if you'd call it pop culture. I think this would be considered non-sport. Even though it is a sport, it's more or less matches that are already kind of predetermined, right? I mean, I think Olympic wrestling is considered sport,
Right.
but actual WWF, WWE, that's considered non-sport for those reasons. And
I would still call it pop culture, because I would argue that wrestling is as much ingrained in our culture as anything else, as Star Wars, Marvel.
Yes.
I mean, I know people that don't follow sports, football, basketball, baseball, or anything like that, but they know certain wrestlers, especially Hulk Hogan.
The one behind you there. Yes.
It's iconic. So I'm a big proponent of calling a wrestling part of pop culture also. And to me, it's a sport, sports entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't consider it a sport, but that's okay. We can disagree on that. I consider MMA a sport, and like Olympic wrestling a sport, but WWE I consider pop culture.
Yeah, very well put. Entertainment, right? And so Dan, I had reached out to you. I had heard that you had some of these incredible employee exclusive PMGs, and I had reached out to you, and we started talking, and pretty quickly made a deal on the Hulk Hogan, and you can see it set up behind me. I have it in hand right here. And I've never thought of myself as a pop culture card collector. I just never have. But after really doing a little bit of research for this episode, and after just talking to you guys in real time, I realize how much I actually do collect pop culture cards. I mean, all these Hulk Hogan autographs, all these Hogan rookies. I mean, Andre the Giant. I mean, that's a huge part of my That's a huge part of my PC. A huge part of what I set up with that shows, because I've just accumulated and hoarded so much Hulk Hogan that I can't possibly keep it all. So I end up with a lot of Hulk Hogan in my case. And oftentimes when people are walking by, people stop and they look at the Hulk Hogan cards because they grew up on the Hulk Hogan cards. They remember the 1985 rookie. They probably owned 15 of them. You know what I mean? And it's a nice pattern interrupt when the people are walking by. And I think that's probably what happens with you guys too, right? When you guys are set up at shows, people are just walking by and all they see are Luka, Zion, Steph Curry, LeBron, 90s basketball inserts. They see all the same stuff, and all of a sudden they walk past your table and they probably just stop, right? And they say, what's this?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and they take pictures too.
They take photos. Yes. Right. And they want to have a conversation about the cards. And I do sports and pop culture, and so I have it all sort of like interspersed in my showcases when I do shows. And In fact, I have a card that I no longer put out in my showcase because I really don't want to sell it. And every time I put it out and I make it really clear that I don't want to sell it, people just throw offers my way all the time. And it becomes tempting. But I've removed it from my show inventory. And it's this Stan Lee autograph here.
Oh, I need one of those.
Yeah,
let me make you an offer on that, Jeff. Come on.
Exactly. So every time I put it out and I'm clear that I don't want to sell it, people will try to pry it away from my hands.
So for those listeners or viewers that might not know who Stan Lee is, can you tell us just a little bit about Stan Lee and his importance in pop culture?
I can't fathom that anybody would not know who Stan Lee was, but for those rare folks out there, I grew up. My first love was comics, and I gravitated towards Marvel comics, gravitated towards X-Men, and read and grew up with all of those comics. And growing up, I always knew that sort of Stan Lee was the sort of founder, right, and creator of the whole like Marvel universe, right? I mean, we can attribute it all to him, right? Every MCU movie that you're watching right now, if you're sitting in the theater watching Wakanda Forever, or on Disney Plus, watching the She-Hulk miniseries that just came out, like all of that is because of Stan Lee, right, and his vision, right, for what he wanted to create. And he was able to actualize that vision, right, to a point where his reach is it's global, right? It transcends, right? Just the physical comics. He's really put a mark and a stamp really on so many folks, young and old.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, like, not only was he just the creator, think of him like the godfather of comic books, but later in his life, he became like an iconic character himself because of the way that he looked, his distinct look, and then he made all these cameos in the movie. So a lot of people might think of him just as a character, but he was actually the guy that
that's right
established what we know today as modern comics.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. And the cool thing about it too is when you have all these things set up in your case, these are conversations that we get to have with people. Right. So it's like there's so much excitement about setting up. And I think that there's this misconception that when you set up as a dealer, that really you're only looking to sell, you're only looking to maximize your money. You don't get me wrong, we're there because we want to move inventory and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we're all collectors, right? We all have. I started setting up at shows for two reasons. One, for content for my show, so I could really have things to talk about on a weekly basis, but also because very shortly after starting to set up, I realized, wow, I can really curate my collection the way that I want to. And when either a card or certain cards maybe feel stale for me and I'm looking to move them, I can move them, and then I can take that money and put it into something bigger that I want. Right. Like already right now I'm thinking about what Disney stuff is out there. I grew up on Disney, I'm now I have Disney Plus on all the time with my daughter. So
there's a light bulb going off.
Oh my God, so many light bulbs. So it's that's the fun part and having these kind of conversations, because Jeff, when you and I were set up next to each other a couple of weeks ago, that's the stuff we were talking about, right?
That's
I think this whole idea came about, like, Dan, I already knew separately. I think I had already talked to you, Dan. I said, you know what, the great Curator, I would love to have you on my show, man. I really enjoy what you do from an entertainment perspective in the hobby. And then I set up next to Jeff, and Jeff, I see just all this action at your table about the Star Wars cards and the Stranger Things cards. And I started just kind of picking your brain on it. And not because I'm looking to get into it, because I don't really have an emotional connection to Star Wars.
Right.
I know it's taboo for you guys. Right? I don't have an emotional connection to Stranger Things, that those aren't shows that I enjoy, but I do love the idea of collecting, and I love the idea of people just being really interested in what you have. So I started picking your brain, and right there I said, Jeff, I would love to have you on the show to talk about this. And knowing that this was gonna be my roundtable month, I said, man, you guys would be the perfect combination of guys to bring on. And so talk to me about Star Wars, guys. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Jeff, I'll defer to you first.
Sure. I was 4 years old in 1977 when Star Wars first came out, and I remember seeing that movie when I was in the movie theaters, and it just blew me away. Um, the mythology of it like became like almost my religion, and there are so many pieces of Star Wars that actually does resonate with like how I think about the world, right? It's very much rooted in Buddhism, and I myself gravitate towards sort of Buddhist practice and ideologies, and so it really shaped who I am. And I'd always hoped that there'd be more Star Wars content that would come out after Return of the Jedi in 1983, and I had to wait, decades, right, for it to expand. And when it finally did, I was just overjoyed. I didn't have the resources when I was younger to buy the original Star Wars cards. Even though I knew they existed, I saw them in like the local deli, along with the sort of garbage pail kids cards, and I always wanted to like rip up those packs, right? And I had classmates in school who had some of those cards, but I could never afford them, even though they weren't very expensive back then. Had to be really sort of frugal in my younger days. So as I got older and became more financially stable, I started looking into like what Star Wars cards were out there, and there was so much that was out there. And I lean more towards a lot of the autograph cards, because to me, like, autographs just feel like super personal, right? You were saying earlier about how like we collect to try to like attain and hold on to something physical, of something that we were emotionally attached to growing up. And for me, that's an autograph, right? Like one of the actors, one of the actresses, one of the pop culture figures, like, actually held that card and signed it. Like, their hands were on there and they put their John Hancock on that card. And to me, that just feels like incredibly personal. And so I started, just acquiring as many like Star Wars autographs as possible. And, I have a few here that I love to show you all. Here's one of, Carrie Fisher, right? In her iconic role as, Princess Leia. Here's like Mark Hamill, right, as Luke Skywalker. There's
pulling out cards, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, Harrison Ford here, right, as Han Solo. And then more recently, and of course, there's Darth Vader, right? James Earl Jones as the original Darth Vader. And then more recently, there's Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian.
I need one of those bad.
Yeah, Samuel L. Jackson, right? As Mace Windu. So, and I just love this stuff, and I'm thrilled to just be able to have it. I like the on-card autos, right? Again, because of what it represents, right? Like, I know that there's a lot of stickers out there, and again, to each their own, right? Obviously, the designers touch those stickers, but I get a kick out of the fact that, like, these folks touch these actual cards and signed them. They held them in their hands, and now I'm holding them, right? So
Yeah, and I think, and that's amazing, man. I mean, your passion that you speak with, from all the way to 4 years old, all the way up till now. I mean, your story sounds so similar to so many, and I know that because it sounds exactly like mine. I could remember, growing up, not having a ton of money, not being able to buy the things I really wanted to buy when it came to sports cards. My dad owning a single Mickey Mantle card, and that being his pride and joy. And it's like a $60 Mickey Mantle card with a big ink stain on the back of it, but it was his. And that meant a lot to him. And now being an adult and having an adult salary and being able to really tap into your childhood by buying these kinds of things, it's amazing. It's almost like that scene in Step Brothers where they put on the night vision goggles. And he's like, could you imagine if we had these when we were kids?
Right.
He's like, even better. We have them when we're 40.
Right. The other shift now, relative to when I was younger, and maybe this resonates with you guys as well, is that, like, it's now cool, right, to be a geek and to love all this, like, sci-fi stuff, right? Whether it's Star Wars, or Star Trek, right? Like it's cool. Like, my 18-year-old college son, like tells his friends, that I have a, Harrison Ford card, or, a Mandalorian Pedro Pascal autograph. Back in the day, some of that stuff was more like on the fringes, like I collected comics as well and read them, and, it wasn't cool. I didn't go around like telling, my boys, that I, ran to the convenience store to buy the next issue of X-Men, but, but now it's really different.
That is so true, because now nerd culture has taken over the world.
Yes.
It's everywhere. But for so many years, it was like taboo
and
embarrassing. It was like
exactly
a dark kept secret. Like after you become an adult, you're not allowed to like collect toys, comic books, or anything like that. You have to do like adult stuff, right? But I think our generation, if you grew up in the last 30, 40 years or so, it's like our generation, we grew up with watching those movies, collecting those toys, reading those comic books and things like that. And, it's nostalgic to us now. And now, like you were saying, Rob, like we're adults, we have adult money, we've become collectors. We went from being like fans and just, kids playing with these things to now we're actually adults and we're collectors. We don't necessarily play with these things anymore, but we kind of catalog it and display it. And it's kind of turned into its own industry just based off of that. And I'll give you an example. Okay. And this is an interesting thing that I kind of want to bring up with you guys too. It's like, so we are card collectors. Okay, let me just show off. Can I just show off one Star Wars card?
Please,
okay?
Please do.
I've got this. I've got my own autograph here. This is a Mark Hamill on in-person auto with an inscription on it. It says, "Welcome to the Death Star." Okay, so we as collectors, we see this and we understand this. This is slabbed up, BGS slab, everything, right? But now, what's I think so interesting is that, as collectors, if we can frame it in a way where it's like encapsulated, suddenly it goes from being just like a novelty to being maybe an investment piece or something that's more collectible, that has value. And I'm seeing this same trend in other types of collectibles that span, across from pop culture, like for comics, for example. Maybe not a lot of people know, but they slab comics too. Same thing. This is X-Men #1 right here.
Yes. CGC graded 3. Yes.
Yeah. What is this? 1963 X-Men comic book. So we see things like that. We see
I need that, Dan.
Okay.
I actually brought some comics as well that I want to show you guys.
We see things like toys, for example. This is going a little down the rabbit hole, but toys are now getting graded. You see the little label here, slabbed up, encapsulated. Even loose toys, like here, you'll like this one, Jeff. Loose toys that are out of the package, things like this.
Oh, that's awesome.
And this is really where collecting is, I think, in my opinion, evolving, because in the 90s or even early 2000s, this is not popular. This is just like PSA back in the day. But now, as collectors, we're not necessarily playing and displaying or posing our collectibles. Now we're trying to more encapsulate them and preserve them, and they're becoming like museum pieces. And then this is where you see that these things start to hold value now, things like that. So I just think that's kind of like an interesting trend that I've been seeing in the pop culture space, where we take the same concept that we had with cards. Now we transfer that to comics and toys, and then, movie props, photographs, things like that.
Yeah. You don't see that kind of stuff, as you were saying, Dan, at like traditional sports card show, like the Dallas show. But I go to a lot of Comic Cons as well. And you do see, a ton of that stuff. Obviously, the CGC graded comics, we're also seeing a proliferation of like video games being graded, right? Like by Wata,
VHS
games that,
tapes too.
Yeah, VHS tapes, right? Like I wish I'd saved some of my VHS tapes from back in the day, but yeah, we're seeing some of that because, the folks that like played with those original games or watched those original movies, right? Like they're adults now, right? And they want to reestablish that connection to their youth, and they have the resources, right, to search out and to like purchase some of these items now in better condition, right? As well. Condition matters tremendously in any collectible industry.
I think with that too, if I can just add to that point, and you'll see it in other areas too. You'll see people collecting vinyl records and things like that, right? And they'll start like grading those things. But I think that, all those things they exist right now. Like they're out there. You can buy them for cheap. But I think that when they start to become in this phase where we're starting to categorize them and kind of keep track of how many of these are through a census report or something like that. That's when we make rarity an issue, and then we want to have the most rare version of the most pristine version of these things. And then that's when that's when you're going to see the crossover from sports card mentality over into all these other sections.
Wow. Excellent points. Now, Jeff, you said that you had some comics with you.
I do, and I want to show them to Dan because I want to acquire his X-Men #1 because it's the only one that I'm missing from the sort of trifecta of the sort of X-Men comics. So
are we going to
put your Pedro auto on the table too?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that Hulk.
So
181.
Hulk 181.
What's the grade on that?
It's super blurred out. It's an 8.0.
Oh, nice.
I don't know how to get this to be clearer. It's an 8.0. It's the first appearance of Wolverine, who is my favorite X-Men. And then I have the second appearance of Wolverine, the giant size X-Men.
Giant size X-Men. I love that one.
Number 1. It's a 8.0 as well. So I just need the X-Men #1 to add to my collection, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Comics were my first love, so happy to reacquire some of these.
I need to get deeper into the comic space, but I transferred my knowledge from sports cards into pop culture cards, and it was an easy transition for me.
Right.
But going into the comic market, completely different.
Yes, it's a
completely
different
learning curve, and to deal with those type of collectors and those type of vendors and dealers.
Yes,
it's tough. It can be tough.
Yes. Yeah. The other unique thing about comics is that they can be pressed. I don't know if you know, and it's not considered to be altered or in any way modified. So you can press a comic to improve its condition. If you ever did that with a sports card, right, it would be a violation of everything that we hold dear in the sports card world.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that about pressing comics.
Yes.
But listen, we're coming up on an hour, so before we wrap up, I did want to ask because the whole Marvel hype boom and then crash of the last year, I think I would imagine that kind of scares off some people, even if they were Marvel fans, diehard Marvel fans. I think that would probably scare some people off from jumping in the water in terms of collecting Marvel cards or whatnot. So what was your interpretation, guys, on just what had happened kind of with Marvel? And I guess, you could look at what happened with the Jordan rookie and the whole sports card market and stuff, right? But why is it that you think that Marvel in particular just took this meteoric rise and then just had the letdown that it did?
If it's okay, Jeff, I'll take this first because I got a lot of heat for that, and somehow people kind of blame me for this. They look at me as one of the leaders in the Marvel category when I'm not. There are people that have a bigger presence in the Marvel collecting industry than me, but I think with Marvel, it's just one of those things where, and I said this earlier too. It's people did not realize that Marvel cards could have value. They look at it more like a novelty. They should be like dollar cards, basically. But the cards that went up significantly in value were not like the ones that we collected in the 90s or the common cards. They were significant, they're PMGs.
Yeah.
Right? Upper Deck made PMGs, which is a legacy brand. And if you compare those PMGs to basketball PMGs, they command a premium because they're very coveted. And I think that what happened with the Marvel cards is that they were not given exposure to the wide public. And then when people started to see them, almost none of them were graded. And then when they started to get graded, that's when people, again, you take a card that looks like a dollar card, you put it in a slab, suddenly people understand it and people see value in it. And that's what created a boom with the Marvel cards, because nobody had ever seen those cards before. Number one, they'd never seen those type of cards, PMGs, and they understand what PMGs were. And 3, they never seen graded versions of these cards before. So all that created a lot of excitement around that industry. And then I think at that time, with sports cards, people were looking for the next area to go in where there's less competition and where they can buy up cards at a good value and then either grade them or or flip them for a premium based off of the demand.
Mhm.
And it's just like anything else, just like any other market, just like the sports card market, there was it trended with that in terms of when it went up and then when it went down, and it was all based on supply and demand. In the beginning, huge demand, very, very, very limited supply. And then when the prices went up, just like sports cards, for example, people cashed out on them, things like that. People who were sitting on these cards suddenly sent them in to get graded. And then when the price went down is because the demand exceeded the supply. There were some golden auctions, like for Golden was really one of the first ones that I was tracking, where they would list like 100 PMGs in their auction. And they would do that for like 3-4 auctions in a row, where they were just flooding the market with these PMGs because people were sitting on them looking to cash out. And that's what kind of caused the decline in the price. But it's no different than what happened with sports cards or any other type of market. It's just that people could not process in their mind that these comic book cards of comic book characters, not real people, that these cards could command any type of serious value in comparison to sports cards.
Right.
And that's why, I'm a real big proponent on viewing these cards as cards as a form of collectible. And the only difference is the IP, but the actual card itself is still collectible. It doesn't matter necessarily what the IP is. Is it a card? Is it collectible? Is it rare? Does it check all those boxes? And if so, what is the market value on that? And I think that's what people are starting to realize with other type of pop culture cards. Star Wars is another one that went up, when people found out about it. Star Wars, wrestling cards, Disney cards, they're all gonna have that that initial pushback, because people, when they look at it, they just think it's a novelty and they don't think of it in comparison to like a Jordan rookie. But if we look at all the same criteria for what makes a card valuable: rarity, relevance, demand, things like that, these boxes check, these type of pop culture cards check those same boxes. So that's just kind of my opinion on that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Dan. The only thing that I will add is that with Marvel cards in particular, I think that growth somewhat coincided with the sort of growth of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Both like in theaters, but also in like TV shows. I think Disney Plus had recently launched, right? So Marvel was really in everybody's household, right? It was something that, again, like folks from the entire age gamut, right, could relate to, because it was so pervasive. And I think folks really saw or thought that there'd be an opportunity there to make a quick profit, and some folks did, and that's great, and some folks lost. But I think we have to also think about the big picture, right? That those Marvel PMGs, right, are still much more valuable right now than they were 5-6 years ago. Right. It's certainly corrected from the pinnacle from a couple of years ago, but they are still astronomically more valuable than they were 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that they align with, if we put it on a chart, like if we look at any of those charts on Card Ladder, Market Movers, or things like that, you will see like a very similar incline and decline in terms of the price. It goes with the card market, and that's what I want people to understand, that these Marvel cards, pop culture cards, or any type of pop culture cards, Star Wars, wrestling, it aligns with sports cards because they're cards. And as the market goes up and down, they're gonna see the same type of problems and same type of success that we've seen in sports cards. They trend together. It's just that people just don't recognize them as like a legit collectible yet.
Yeah. And very well said. I think that was something though that I had to ask, because we're sitting here talking about pop culture cards, and I think the Marvel crash, if that's what you want to call it, has been very well documented over the last year or so. And it's, I actually had a listener, and he's a great listener. He's he's always giving me feedback on my shows, good, bad, or indifferent. And he said, Rob, just to throw this out there, people can look at you like you're pumping the cards that sit behind you. That can look at you, you could be viewed as someone that's pumping right now. And I'm like, you know what? You're not wrong. Like, what can I say to that? You're not wrong. So I think, but I love these cards. These are my PC cards. They sit behind me. And if I ever moved one of them, I would slide a new card in, you know what I mean? But for now, these are my PC cards, and And so,
Can I comment
I
on
mean,
that?
can I comment on that as well?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
go ahead.
like, so what? Like, what's wrong with pumping your cards, right? You love them. That's why you collect them, right? Like, I think some folks are like defining pumping just from like a monetary perspective, but you're not doing that, right? You're pumping the cards that you love, that you have this connection to, that are part of your PC. And from what I can gather, so are you, Dan, and so am I, right? And if they happen to go up in value, that's lovely, right? But that's not why we're pumping them. We're pumping them because we love them.
And to add to that, this is why I want to change the idea of what it is to be successful in the hobby. Everything is seen as monetary now. Like, we have a card, we only bought this card to flip it, to make profit on it, and that's not necessarily the case for everybody. I mean, we are this is a hobby, and the foundations of this hobby is being a collector. So when people say, you're pumping your cards just because you display it in the back, I don't. That's to me, that's not a bad thing. Number one, but to me, I don't even use the word pumping. I call it pride of ownership. You want to show off your stuff. People forget, before social media came, where it was very easy to post cards and everybody sees it. One of the most exciting things as a collector was when somebody came to your house and they go into your collectible room and you get to show off your stuff. Back then nobody would say, "Oh, you're pumping. Hey, you're pumping your collection." No, it's pride of ownership. We show it off. We should be showing off all the stuff that we have, and because that is really where the success comes in. How passionate can you be? How much of a collection you can build, and how much you can share that with the community. And that's why I really try to like normalize the idea of pumping your cards, right? With pump what you like hashtags, and just try to give people that idea that it's okay to be a collector first and show off your cards. Not everything is about profit. Now, all those cards in the background there, I'm sure they're worth a lot of money. I know they are, but who cares, right? It doesn't matter, because the value of those cards will go up and down as the market goes, right? That's a totally separate thing. But for you, having those amazing cards, I think I see a Babe Ruth, I see a Mickey Mantle, I see a Hulk Hogan rookie, LeBron James, or Bill Russell rookie
Bill
there,
Russell right
and
there.
Hogan PMG. That is a crazy, crazy collection that anybody would be proud to show off. It's like a museum. You're putting them on display for people to enjoy. And I think that people have to stop being so cynical about these type of things, and appreciate it for what it is, as one collector to another showing off their collection.
And to be fair, there may be some folks that sort of show off their collection to pump the value of it, right? I don't tend to interact with those folks, but I'm sure those are out there. And what I would say to folks who are like being exposed to that kind of sort of pumping, for lack of a better word, is to like sort of like think critically about what you're consuming, right? I mean, I think that's also the lesson learned from the sort of Marvel fluctuation, right? Is that it's important to be thoughtful and intentional and strategic about what you're buying, right? Don't just buy something because quote unquote somebody's pumping it.
Yeah, and I think definitely, and I think a big part of it is, why are you in this hobby, right? If you are in this hobby, regardless if it's sports cards or if it's pop culture cards, if you are in it because you're hoping to retire early and buy the right cards at the right time and sell, chances are you're not going to win. I think the people that it seems like really end up winning in this hobby are people that like loved Marvel, right? Like they loved Marvel. They had been collecting Marvel for years. The market was going up. They sold, they made a bunch of money, and they felt pretty good about it, So I think to go back to what we've been saying, to beat a dead horse, you have to have a passion for what it is that you're collecting. And I mean, Dan, I'm not sure if you caught the episode. I did an episode about 10 weeks ago, and I think I spent like 10 minutes just kind of talking about your hashtag pump what you like. And
Was this with Drake?
What was that?
Was this with Drake?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I saw that.
Yep. So and basically, what I walked away from that really saying was like, yeah, I mean, if we post a card on our Instagram, I guess we're pumping it, right? Like, why wouldn't, like, if I have cards set up behind me, I guess we're pumping it. But like, why wouldn't we be enthusiastic about the things that we like? Why wouldn't we be? That's what all the fun is, right? It's a hobby, and we're enthusiastic. And what I get out of that, because I think that word pump in the hobby, it's a taboo word, but it feels like what it is you're doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like what you're doing with like pump what you like is you're trying to take the taboo-ness or the naughtiness out of the word pump.
Mhm.
Right? Because really you're just like, hype up what you like be
Right.
proud of what you like,
Mhm.
be proud of what you collect and show it off. Like that's what I hear when I hear you doing it, especially like when I see your videos and stuff.
Mhm.
um I mean, I look at someone that either you're a really good actor or you're really having a fun time doing this stuff, and it seems like you're having a really fun
Yeah.
time doing it.
That's what it seems like to me as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would say I think that um pump and dump has been like misappropriated in the hobby as a term that people look at as, like you said, as a taboo thing. But really, if you, I mean, I call it showing off, I call it pride of ownership. If you want to call it pumping, that's fine. But pumping is not a bad thing. It's okay to show off your stuff. And the reason I take a like a hard stance to this, because I get so many comments from a lot of people where they say they're hesitant to show off a card because they don't want to get roasted or made fun
Mhm.
of, and or they have these cards in their collection and people just accuse them of showing off cards that that they should not be showing off because they're junk cards or whatever like that. And I just don't like this state that we're in, where it's basically we're shaming people for showing off their cards, because
Mhm.
again, it's like people forgot what the foundation of the hobby is, which is collecting and showing off your collection, sharing
Mhm.
that with the community of people. Somewhere along the lines it got muddied where people view things as saying, okay, that card is being posted, we must buy it for whatever
Right.
reason. Okay, there's a real big difference between saying, okay, this is a grail card of mine, I love it, and I have it, it's great, and saying that this card is going to increase in value 10x within
Mhm.
X amount of months. You should invest in these cards. Those are two totally different things. But I think somewhere along the lines, people just kind of blurred them together. So we have to separate that and just kind of let people know that it's okay to collect what you like. It's okay to show off. And we shouldn't be like pointing fingers at people or anything like that, because we don't really know what their intentions are.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think just like you said, if you're sitting there, I'll give you an example, and I could be wrong, and I try not to read too much into it. I could be wrong when it comes to making these assumptions, but I could remember when just in the last week or two, when Zion had like a pretty good game and he put up like big numbers, right? Zion Williamson, right? And I'm starting to see just from certain people, and let me tell you, the only people I was really seeing this from were dealers. They're like, he's back, 38 points. They're showing off that one highlight where he had an awesome dunk. He's back. And then the following slide on their story was his rookie now I have for sale. Get it now for 9,500 before the price goes up. And it's like, and then same thing with like the Tyler Hero cards. Everyone was
Mhm.
high on Tyler Hero during the bubble. And then he fell off the face of the earth, and then the season started again, and he had like a 3-game stretch where he put up double figures, and people are like, he's back. And then they'd show like 10 Tyler Hero cards they finally just got back from PSA that they were selling. To me, that's pumping. But if you're just sitting there like
Mhm.
adding fuel to the fire of what you love, and you're not following it up with, by the way, this Han
Mhm.
Solo's for sale.
Right. Right. Yeah, to me that's pumping as well, and I'll add that I think that's okay as well, right? I think folks are allowed to do that in a hobby that does have like a capitalistic element to it. I think that's fine. I think what I would encourage folks who are like, again, consumers of that like information to do is like really think for themselves about like what they're
Mhm.
hearing. Right? Just because you or I might say that something might go up in value doesn't mean that like you don't then have to sort of think about it, right? And just sort of take what we're saying at face value.
Yeah.
And if I can follow up that point too, I think people have to understand that part of this hobby is a major component of a way to be active in this hobby is to buy, sell, and trade.
Mhm.
That's almost, you have to do that, right? To be part of this hobby, to be active and to accumulate cards and move inventory in that. So that's always going to be there no matter what. And just because you set up at shows or you sell cards on Instagram doesn't mean that you do that full time for a living, and that everything has to have like some type of ulterior motive when you show off cards. So I think people have to understand that. And the second point I want to make here is that we have to be very careful, and I think we have to educate people about this too, of consuming content in the hobby, in the context of the hobby, that is geared towards making or creating a false sense of grievance in people when they shouldn't be angry. We shouldn't be blindly consuming content that says this person's bad for this reason, so we should hate on them, because it's creating a very divisive environment right now that I'm noticing, and it's taking accountability away from people's decisions. I bought this card and it went down in value because this guy told me to.
Right.
He owes me money, or we don't shouldn't listen to him. That's not how things work. You know what I mean?
Right,
People have
right.
to understand that we all make our own decisions. We all
Yes.
buy our own cards, sell our own cards, and
Right.
things like that. And we shouldn't just because some dude made a video saying that this person's bad for whatever reason doesn't mean we should feel that way, get angry at a person that we have no interactions with, and not take accountability for our own decisions on how successful we are in the hobby.
Yeah, Rob and I were just talking about that a few weeks ago at the show in New Jersey, right? That people make assumptions about people's intentions way too quickly, right? And without like sort of thinking more critically about it, and without like taking ownership, right? Like for their own decision-making process. And I think that just creates a really sort of toxic, shaming kind of environment. And it's not the kind of hobby that I feel proud to be in if it becomes that way.
When I first got back into the hobby during the pandemic, just like many people, I was in and out of hobby my whole life, and I came back into the pandemic. For a period of like 6, 7, 8 months, I felt like a kid again. I loved it. Everything in the hobby was joyful, pure. It was incredible. And then, some of these things started to happen where people would start make negative content. People were starting pointing fingers at each other and things like that. And I think we just have to be careful about that, because we've got a very special thing. Everybody that's involved in the hobby, we have a very special environment right now where we can essentially relive our childhood. We can make money doing it. We can have fun. We can interact with like-minded people, have common interests and things like that. We have to be very careful to have a high standard of conduct within the hobby, where we don't turn this into something that's toxic, something that's your side versus my side, and then it becomes very divisive, and it mirrors other types of communities outside of the hobby.
Right. Yep. The other thing that I was mentioning to Rob at that show is that that we all make mistakes, right? Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, right? And I think I would want folks to extend grace and compassion to me if I made a mistake, right? And so I'm going to try to extend that to others, right? Especially if I don't know them directly or personally, right? But I'm hearing about it secondhand that they did something that maybe was not as acceptable in the industry, right? I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that they take accountability for what they did, but also try to be like kind and compassionate moving forward, right? We can hold people accountable while still being kind and gracious towards them.
Yeah, and very well said by both of you, gentlemen, for sure. And I echo the same thing that Dan was just saying. I think I've been in and out of the hobby my whole life. I grew up in the hobby and then got out of it. Pandemic, same story. And early on, it was like, yes, oh my God, this is amazing. This is my Graceland right here. And then funny that we're even having this conversation, but today I was just messaging with Kyle from Wax Museum. He's someone who I consider a friend in the hobby, and we're just talking back and forth. And I said to him, and I'm reading this word for word. I said, the deeper you go, I said, there are a lot of politics and landmines in the field of content creation. The deeper you go in this hobby, the more you see it's a complex spider web of relationships and beefs. That's literally what I just said.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just like, so it's almost like, just like, you talk about like the markets, it's, it's never as good as it seems, or it's never as bad as it seems. So I think like when I came in with like this childlike innocence, I came back in like 3 years ago, I thought everything was just like, fields of flowers. And then I realized like, holy crap, no, the land of Oz is actually run by an evil man behind a curtain. But yeah. No, this is all good stuff though, guys. This is great conversation. It's been so much fun having you guys on and talking. Before we wrap up, did you guys bring any other cards that we didn't get to show off?
I was about to ask you if I could just pump a couple more cards before we sign off.
Please.
Yeah. You want to go first, Jeff?
I'll just show off one more card, which is a Pokemon card. Oh man, I wish I could figure out how to make this.
Put it in front of your face. I think that's why.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, because you have the blur effect on.
Oh, I see. All right, so it's in front of my face now, and it's a
I
a
see it's a BGS 9.
right. So it's encapsulated by BGS, the BGS 9, and it's a world championship trophy card.
Wow.
Which can only be earned by placing in first to fourth place at the Pokemon World Championships.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and I've acquired and have sold quite a few of these, but the one that I was just holding in my hand is one that is like immeasurably special to me because my son won this one in
What?
2015. Yes.
Wow, that's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Man.
we both played Pokemon competitively for many years, and it culminated with him finishing in second place in 2015 . And so I
All right,
will
how
never
much you
sell
want
that
for it?
card. I'm not pumping it. I'm proud of it, right? And want to show it off because it reflects just all the hard work, right, that my son and I put into the game, and I'm just proud of his accomplishments.
So the nerd fandom is generational in your
It,
household.
it is definitely generational. Yes. He
All
had no
right.
choice.
So I'm gonna go next because I have a feeling that Dan is just gonna trump whatever it
Gonna blow
is.
us away.
There's no way I want to go after Dan.
Mhm.
So these are just a couple low end pop culture cards. So you know, growing up here on the East Coast, tri-state, I grew up in Connecticut in the 80s and 90s. I grew up just a complete hip hop head. So I have these two smash hit cards
Oh,
that are
Snoop
considered
Dogg.
Snoop Dogg's rookie and Puff Daddy's rookie.
Yes, P Diddy.
Yep.
Mhm.
So crazy thing about these is I had bought these off eBay in incredible condition,
Mhm.
sent them out to PSA to get graded with like 10 other cards, and that package got stolen in transit. So I had just mentioned it, crying the blues on my show. I just said, yeah, I lost some cards and it was tough. I had my buddy, we both kind of went in on something. And then I had a New York City police officer, NYPD, that collects cards and is a fan of my show. And he said, listen, man, I have the complete set. I'm going to send you a complete set on
Mm.
me. So I said, oh my God. I said, you know what? As soon as I got them, I'm not even getting them slabbed up. They're PC for
Yeah.
life. So I have those two, and I I'm a Seinfeld fanatic. I
Mhm.
grew up in the '90s watching it when it was on NBC. I used to VHS record every
Mhm.
single episode, and I would pause it at the commercials and then unpause it when it came on. So I had every episode ever of Seinfeld on VHS. I was binge watching Seinfeld way before DVDs ever came
Mhm.
out. So, I have every episode memorized. I have a Seinfeld fanatics group on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
We're about 190,000 members. I started it like 6 years ago. It was just like me,
Wow.
friends, and family, and
Mhm.
slowly people started joining it. So I got this. This is the Soup
The
Nazi
Soup Nazi.
on
Oh,
card auto of the
No
Soup
soup for
Nazi.
you.
Exactly.
who makes
And I
that
have
card?
what was that?
Who makes that card? Is that a custom card?
Yeah, I think it's just a custom card that
Oh,
he probably
cool.
had at an autograph signing, and it's slabbed up by PSA. I also have the Pop Century one of Yev Kasem,
Yeah.
and his name is Larry Thomas in real
Uh-huh.
life. I have the Pop Century, but this is a little bit cooler because it's like an in-action shot of him on the show.
That
So
is super cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
just and something like this is something that is so incredible for me. I
Mhm.
will never move it. I think I bought it from someone at a Laz show in New
Mhm.
Jersey, and I think I paid like $40 for it.
Right.
It's like and something like this that just means so much to me,
Mhm.
for so it's things like that make me really, really love the pop culture
Mhm.
cards. So Dan, what do you got for us rounding us out?
All right. If you guys can just bear with me, I've got about like 5 cards, but I'll go through it really quick here. Okay. We'll start with wrestling here. Me and you are part of the very prestigious Hulk Hogan
Yes.
PMG Club. Here's one that I have. This is my PSA 9 Hulk
Oh.
Hogan PMG. I love PMGs and I love wrestling, so this is like the perfect combination for me. I also love superfractors, and this one is really special to me. This is a Sergeant Slaughter Transcendent Superfractor.
Mhm.
Sergeant Slaughter, I love him because I'm a big GI Joe fan. So to me, he's like a real life GI Joe. Also a wrestler. So I have this. That's really cool.
That's an incredible card. I did not know you owned that. That's an incredible card.
He's got another super fractor he's going to show.
To show off, but this is my personal favorite. This one is probably not worth a lot to anybody because who cares about Sergeant Slaughter? But to me, I love Sergeant Slaughter, so I have that. Some unique stuff here is this 1985 wrestling. These are Prism Jewel stickers. These are the Road Warriors here, slabbed up. These are pretty rare to find slabbed up.
Those are extremely valuable.
Yes,
I've never seen those.
Yep.
So I have a large collection of them. These are not ones that I wanted to show off, but there's a Sergeant Slaughter right there, and then there's another Sergeant Slaughter. So these things are pretty cool. I like the Prism type stickers.
Yeah, and I think most people and Prism. This Prism is spelt with an S and not a C. So when you talk about Prism, it's spelt with an S. And to bring it back to mainstream a little bit, the Michael Jordan Prism sticker. That I think is either 85 or 86. When people are talking about like what's his true rookie, oftentimes the Prism sticker, and the Prism sticker is the thing that you could get for 50 cents in like the gumball machine. You put 50 cents in, right? You kind of push the thing in and it would kind of pop out. But the Michael Jordan is sometimes brought up in that conversation. So those early like mid 80 Prism stickers, especially yours that you have slabbed up by PSA, the Hulk Hogan ones go for over 10K. Unbelievable.
I have this one. I haven't slabbed it up yet, but I have it. It's right there. Okay.
I myself have a Prism Hogan sticker around here somewhere. If I knew we were going to be talking about that out of everything, I definitely would have had it in arm's reach. I have no idea where it is right now, though. But it's not that one, but a different one.
To finish up my wrestling, and I got two more cards to show you here. I'm a big fan of women's wrestling. I love women's wrestling. So I've got this jumbo transcendent quad auto of the Four Horsewomen. So this is just something special. This is out of 5, number 1 of 5. Something that I love. Women's wrestling, don't sleep on that. That's very, very, very awesome to watch.
There's a huge following, especially in the last like 10 years with those women, right? Like Charlotte Flair, Bella, like they have a huge following. Yep.
Yeah, that's my Charlotte Flair Superfractor.
That's another Superfractor.
Yeah, so that's all the wrestling cards, and then the last pop culture cards I'll show off here just for fun. These cards are not
you need to join Drake's next wrestling Instagram live. I don't know.
I was offended that he didn't include me. No,
listen, you need to be on that, okay? Yeah. Because your collection is crazy.
Drake's a big wrestling guy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
I did not know that. Yes.
I'll finish this off here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but just some fun stuff that I'm sure people don't even know exist. This is a Tom Cruise sticker from Top Gun. So what year is this? This is 1987.
Oh, I would have said 85.
That's cool.
Yeah, Tom Cruise sticker. I think it's really cool. That last movie that came out, I thought was awesome. So I had to get something. Again, I needed a little physical representation of something that I love, and I love that last movie. And then the last one, since you guys are showing off Pop Century stuff, this is a Michael Keaton as Batman. It says Batman down here.
Right.
Michael Keaton auto, 1 of 1, whatever they call it, old gold crystal 1 of 1 Pop Century, right there. So
super cool.
Hands down the best Batman ever. I won't include Adam West in this conversation, but Michael Keaton, hands down, best Batman.
He was
ever.
my favorite.
Yes.
Man. Well, gentlemen, listen, it was a pleasure having you guys on. This went incredible. This one, I mean, I had high hopes for this, but this one even better than I had anticipated, and we're running out of time of almost an hour 25 minutes here. So thank you to anyone that is still listening. You guys are the real MVP here. So if they want to reach out to you guys, Dan, how can people find you? How can they reach out to you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at The Great Curator. On Instagram, I show off all my collection. I post funny reels, memes, things like that. Just fun content. And then on YouTube, I have a channel. I have a podcast, a weekly podcast called Between Two Slabs. I do it with my partner Merlin Merwar Cards, and during that we have like long form discussions just like this, where we just talk about hobby stuff and have fun with that. So you can find me on those two platforms and on TikTok at The Great Curator.
And that's a play on, I would imagine, between two ferns,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Zach Galifianakis.
Yes, yes.
I figured it's got to be, but it's cool.
Almost everything I do has an inside joke.
Love it. Love
That's
it.
great. Yeah, and I'm only on Instagram. I'm not, navigating all the social media platforms. So just Instagram at Jeffs_cards. I'm at a lot of shows locally in the New York City tri-state area. I do the Dallas card show every couple of months. And I try to attend as many of the larger shows as possible.
Well, beautiful, guys. Again, thank you so much for coming on this pop culture card roundtable. And all December, I am doing these roundtables with all various unique topics. And, really, I would like this interview, this video, to be the go-to video for pop culture card know-how. And I think we covered so many bases here. I don't know how it couldn't be. So again, guys, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having us.